I'm going to talk about Tamar Ross, the Orthodox feminist contemporary scholar and thinker, but that's not the real Tamar Ross. This is the real Tamar Ross. Born in 1938 in Detroit, Michigan, Ross began her academic career studying Hebrew literature and Jewish history at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem in the 60s and 70s. She wrote her master's dissertation on the holy and the profane in the thought of Rabbi Abraham Isaac Kook. And Kook has continued to be a foundational figure in her philosophical and theological work since then. She moved into the field of hardcore Jewish thought with her doctoral work in the 80s, studying moral philosophy in the writings of Rabbi Salanter's disciples in the Mussar movement. Having held academic positions at Hebrew University, Ben-Gurion University, Memphis State University, Yeshiva U, the Shalom Hartman Institute, Yale, Oxford, and Bar-Ilan, Tamar Ross is quite the scholarly figure. However, she's always been engaged in the contemporary Jewish communal world alongside her academic work. Ross's areas of interest within modern Jewish thought have included Jewish ethics and theology, the nature of revelation, contemporary issues in traditional Jewish thought, the philosophy of halakha, the thought of Rav Kook, the modern Mussar movement, and Judaism and gender. She develops the metaphor of expanding the palace of Torah, taken from Rav Kook, arguing for the concept of evolving revelation, that is, that people learn more as history evolves and societies develop and mature. Her theology seeks to address contemporary concerns by expanding rather than undermining religious tradition. Cook's ideas have helped her reconcile her deep religious sensibility with this kind of theology. Let's take one of Ross's most significant examples, feminism. Tamar Ross recalls how at the very first Jewish Orthodox Feminist Alliance conference, everyone was thinking the same thing, but didn't dare say it. How can we believe in God's Torah when it's so suffused with male perspective? She explains that the very use of language means that as the Torah is passed down, it is processed in the minds of the listeners. Interpretation is always going on, but interpreters must take God's work seriously. Therefore, there's a negotiation between the perceiver and the object or idea being perceived. When the historical perceiver was always male, that clearly impacts the way we have received information about the object being perceived. There must be a balance achieved. This is what Tamar named cumulative revelation, the continuous interpretation of God's Torah so that new societal situations are taken into account. At the same time, she doesn't believe that anything goes, that every innovation is acceptable. Religious decisions and interpretations must fit within the multi-layered tradition that has developed throughout the ages in the interpretive community. Ross's cumulative revelation almost moves upwards, standing against the concept of Yeridat Hadorot, the idea that the knowledge of Torah diminishes with time. However, she also argues against approaches of progressive and liberal theologies. She claims that we must not see ourselves as morally superior beings looking backwards upon morally depraved forebears, but rather as dwarfs who can only see more than the giants because we stand on their shoulders. According to Rav Kook, God is constantly being revealed in history. As such, Ross writes that the divine contains the potential of bringing new possibilities into the world. It is affected and changed by human activity and in turn affects man who brings new possibilities into the world. In light of Ross's views, the question has arisen as to how her theology differs from that of conservative Jews, who consider halakha a developmental process. Ross answers, I don't think there is a difference in ideology, but in how it's applied. She certainly sees herself as an Orthodox Jew. As she writes, Orthodox theology is a theology that supports the Orthodox way of life, relates to its traditions, and expresses itself in Orthodoxy's distinctly halachic view. What is in or out is not something that can be decisively defined in accordance with some predetermined formula. The test is pragmatic, the degree of its effectiveness in providing a conceptual framework that facilitates identification with the community of the halachically committed, its key concepts, attitudes, and hierarchy of values. There are, however, a number of buts, ands, howevers in the way Tamar Ross sees the world and the divine as compared to her many Orthodox co-religionists. She sees feminism as a manifestation of divine providence, not an input from the secular modern world, undermining some kind of original authority of Judaism, but as a way of hearing the message, a spiritual undertaking of the first order, Avodat HaKodesh. So, in sum, Tamar Ross is pretty cool. There's definitely a lot that we can learn from her. Still some issues alongside, but I think we have a significant amount more to learn from this wonderful contemporary thinker. The end. But then again, does progressive or cumulative revelation ever really end?